Thank you, Annie. And good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Several years ago, I was at the George Peabody Library, a rare book library in Baltimore, in whose sixth-floor collection of books are two shelves of town histories from Massachusetts. Peabody was one of America's greatest philanthropists in the 19th century. He grew up in poverty in South Danvers, Massachusetts, a town whose name was later changed to Peabody to honor him. When he died, his net worth was 1/556th of the gross national product. All his life, however, he was acutely aware of his humble origins. His fondness for amateur histories of forgotten places in his home state tells us something about him. In any case, on this shelf was a history of Framingham I'd never seen. It was written by a minister named William Barry and published in 1847. He introduced the book by saying this: "The following history," and he capitalized history, can possess but little interest beyond the neighborhood whose memorials it is designed to preserve. Some may even be disposed to question the propriety of dignifying with so ambitious an epithet the simple annals of an agricultural town. He then goes on to justify his efforts in a 127-word sentence.
Wow.
He catalogs what he learned, what can be learned, by studying New England villages. I won't quote it all, but here's a bit. "The examples they display of heroic faith, of invincible courage, of generous self-sacrifice, of bold and untiring enterprise, the illustration they afford to the genius of the age and the race that transformed the stern cliffs and gloomy forests of these western wilds into a cultivated and flourishing commonwealth," etc., etc. You get the picture. I thought of this statement when Annie asked me if I would say a few things about local history and why I'm supporting it at this event. The Reverend Barry believed you could learn about every human virtue by examining the history of a place like Framingham. I agree with him. I also think you can learn about vice, failure, and self-delusion the same way. Although the Reverend Barry, being an optimistic Unitarian as well as a historian, wasn't interested in that side of the story. Nevertheless, he was correct in his belief that the study of a single town is a way to understand a state, a region, a whole country. You don't need to study great men or great women to learn about epical historical events. The carefully examined lives of ordinary people will teach you just as much. That, in a word, is why I love places like the Framingham History Center and why they are so important. Their objects and manuscripts, their photographs and oral histories, their official documents and family letters, and in little-known books like William Barry's, they are the holders of the raw material of American history. Without them, many of the stories of how people like you and I were touched by historical events and how we affected them would be lost. With them, we can see ourselves in circumstances that occurred long ago. With them, we can experience the thought experiment: what would I have done an essential act of studying the past. Considered that way, any town will do, which was kind of the Reverend Barry's point. But the funny thing is that Framingham may be the ideal keyhole through which to examine American history. Framingham is the Arthur Zelig and Forrest Gump of American towns. And by the way, I know it's just become a city, but tonight it's still a town. In an odd and exceedingly lucky way, Framingham has found itself a disguised participant or a surprise witness of great events in American history. I won't mention them all, but here are a few. The most notorious example of state-sponsored hysteria and victimization in early America were the Salem witch trials of 1691 and 1692. Two sisters, Sarah Clays and Rebecca Nurse, of Salem Village were convicted and Rebecca was hanged. Sarah, however, escaped prison under circumstances that aren't fully understood and moved to Framingham with her family and several others. The part of town where they lived is still called Salem End. A house she may have occupied was recently saved from destruction with the help of the History Center. The overlooked role of blacks in the American Revolution is exemplified by two men once enslaved in Framingham. Crispus Attucks, who was killed at the Boston Massacre, and Peter Salem, who killed Major John Pitcairn at the Battle of Bunker Hill, a key event in that engagement. The Battle Hymn of the Republic, the greatest anthem in English to the idea of holy war, was first sung in public a couple hundred yards from here in the old Plymouth Church. The most important observational study in epidemiology is the Framingham Heart Study, started in 1948 and still going, and of whose offspring cohort I'm proud to be a card-carrying member. The last surviving ace of World War I learned from the History Center's current exhibit was from Framingham. And Annie just pointed out, it's his birthday today. But of course, history isn't just the deep past. The job of institutions like the Framingham History Center isn't just to bring the dead alive. In his essay, The American Scholar, Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "Meek young men grow up in libraries believing it their duty to accept the views which Cicero, which Locke, which Bacon have given, forgetful that Cicero, Locke, and Bacon were only young men in libraries when they wrote these books." I love that quote for many reasons. One of them is that it reminds us that the past is just the present that arrived a little earlier than we did. What will soon be considered history is happening right now. When you look at history that way, a whole lot of opportunities open up for institutions like the Framingham History Center. Framingham has the 5th highest percentage of residents who are Brazilian immigrants of any community in the United States. Annie and I have talked about the importance of telling the story of this latest wave of Framingham's immigrants sometime soon. Indians were here first, of course. Then came the English. Then black Africans. Later, the Irish, Swedes, and Italians. Now, the Brazilians. How did Framingham become a destination for them? Why did they leave Brazil? What were the occupational niches they filled here? How many returned to Brazil? Does their story differ in big ways from that of Framingham's previous immigrants? This is a fertile field for oral history, for school projects, for civic instruction, for consciousness raising, for marketing. When I was growing up, the Framingham Historical Society, as it was then called, was the domain of white-haired ladies who opened it one Sunday a month in warm weather. We can thank them for keeping the flame alive. Today it has a staff that possesses the skills of professionals and the enthusiasm of amateurs. Exactly the combination you want in people who run a museum. Which gets me to why I'm here today. A number of years ago, when I drew up a will for the first time, I included a gift to the Framingham History Center. This was not only because I love Framingham and history, but because it was a way of honoring my family's connection to the town. My great-grandfather, who was the bearded man in the photograph over there, helped outfit the 13th Massachusetts Regiment, whose battle flag hangs over there. And was on the committee that raised the money to erect this building. My father was born here and lived here almost his whole life, and was president of the Historical Society for a few years of his retirement. My mother, not a Framingham native, loved the town and served it in many ways, including as longtime head of the committee that ran Edgell Grove Cemetery, where their ashes now lie. And I'm proud to mention that my niece, Brooke Hooks, is in the room here, so we may go on to another generation of Brown descendants interested in these. Last year, I decided to give part of this gift now. Life is short, the stock market is hot, and Annie Murphy is someone whose work I want to support and honor while she's still on the job. Part of this year's gift is a challenge, as you've heard, and I'm happy to learn, as I did a few minutes ago, that we're halfway to the full match goal. So thank you all for that. We live in a time when an appreciation of history, of our history, this is where I start. No, but I cry as much as she does. Could really help make the United States a freer, more tolerant, and happier place. Should you agree, I invite you to consider whether supporting the Framingham History Center might be a way of advancing that noble goal. Speaking just for myself,